Welcome to the only channel where a 1,000-year-old dragon ranks human suffering, scientifically of course. I am Antony Emerald, jade-scaled, long-bearded, and infinitely wiser than your history teacher. Today, we rank the 7 deadliest wars in human history, sorted by pure, unfiltered brutality. Wars that broke nations, erased cities, and rewrote the map of the world. Buckle up. This one is going to hurt. Emotionally, hopefully not physically, unless you're into that. Before we start spilling blood, metaphorically, let me explain how we rank these wars. Here at Antony Emerald's lair, we don't use opinions. We use the 4 coins of judgment. Each coin scores a war from 0 to 10. 0 means it barely scratched history. 10 means it shattered it. The 4 coins are added together for a total brutality score out of 40. Coin number 1, the Socioeconomic Impact coin. This measures the destruction of infrastructure, economic collapse, famine, disease outbreaks caused by the war, and the total financial cost. How badly did it break the machine of civilization? Coin number 2, the Duration and Scale coin. How long did the conflict last? How many nations were dragged into the fire? How much of the world's map was scorched? Coin number 3, the Human Impact coin. The deadliest coin of all. Total deaths, soldiers, civilians, everyone. Proportion of the global population affected. The wounded, the mutilated, the displaced. This coin does not flinch. And coin number 4, the long-term consequences coin. Because some wars don't just kill people, they haunt generations. Political instability for decades. Geopolitical borders redrawn forever. Intergenerational trauma. And, most damning of all, the wars they caused afterward. Simple, right? Let's begin. Starting at the bottom of our list, with a war the world still hasn't technically ended. Number 7. The Korean War. June 25, 1950. North Korea, backed by the Soviet Union, pours across the 38th parallel into South Korea. Within days, a civil conflict becomes a Cold War proxy battle involving the United States, China, the United Nations, 17 nations total. 3 years of brutal trench warfare, aerial bombardment, and sub-zero winters in the mountains of the Korean Peninsula. And then an armistice in 1953. Not a peace treaty, an armistice. Which means, technically, the Korean War is still not over, as of this very moment. Wild, isn't it? Coin 1, Socioeconomic Impact. The Korean Peninsula was devastated. The North lost over 85% of its industrial capacity. Cities like Pyongyang were bombed into rubble. 635,000 tons of bombs dropped, more than during the entire Pacific theater of World War II. The South's economy collapsed entirely. Entire agricultural regions were destroyed, triggering famine conditions. Total estimated financial cost, over $30 billion in 1950s value. South Korea took decades to rebuild. North Korea never truly did. Coin 1 score, 6 out of 10. Coin 2, Duration and Scale. 3 years of active combat. 17 nations contributed troops under the UN flag. The conflict was geographically limited, primarily the Korean Peninsula, but its ideological scale was global, fueling Cold War tensions that shaped the next 40 years. Short war by historical standards, big consequences by any standard. Coin 2 score, 5 out of 10. Coin 3, Human Impact. over 2.5 million dead, more than 800,000 military casualties on both sides, approximately 1.5 million civilians killed, caught between invading armies, carpet bombing, and executions. Over 10 million Koreans were separated from their families, many never reunited. The peninsula's birth rate dropped 15% during the war years. Coin 3 score, 6 out of 10. Coin 4, long-term consequences. The Korean peninsula remains divided to this day. North Korea evolved into one of the most isolated, militarized dictatorships on Earth, a direct product of this war. The conflict locked in Cold War dynamics for generations, triggered massive U.S. military buildup, and established the precedent for U.S. intervention in proxy wars, including Vietnam. Intergenerational trauma in Korea remains one of the most documented cases of war psychology in modern history. Coin 4, score, 7 out of 10. Total score, 24 over 40. 24 out of 40. Enough to make the list, but trust me, what's coming next makes the Korean War look like a polite disagreement.
Number 6. The Napoleonic Wars, 1803 to 1815.
One man, one absolutely unhinged ambition. Napoleon Bonaparte, 5'7" of pure historical chaos. From 1803 to 1815, Napoleon's France waged war against virtually every major European power: Britain, Russia, Prussia, Austria, Spain. Battles from Egypt to Moscow. The continental system choked trade across Europe. For 12 years, the continent bled. Coin 1. Socioeconomic Impact. Europe's economy was shredded. The continental system, Napoleon's trade blockade against Britain, devastated commerce across the continent, triggering food shortages and inflation from Portugal to Poland. In Spain, the Peninsular War destroyed entire provinces. In Russia, the 1812 scorched earth retreat reduced Moscow to ash. Infrastructure, roads, ports, bridges, destroyed across dozens of nations. Recovery took decades in the worst-hit regions. Coin 1. Score, 7 out of 10. Coin 2. Duration and scale. 12 years of near-continuous warfare. Across Europe, North Africa, the Caribbean, Russia, and the Atlantic. Every major European power participated. The scale of mobilization was unprecedented in history up to that point. Over 3 million soldiers served in French forces alone. Coin 2. Score, 8 out of 10. Coin 3. Human impact. Estimates range from 3.5 million to 6 million dead. Historian Charles Esdale estimates 5 to 7 million deaths, including civilians. The 1812 Russian campaign alone destroyed Napoleon's Grande Armée of 600,000 men. 90% of losses from starvation, hypothermia, and typhus in the Russian winter. Civilian casualties from guerrilla warfare in Spain, famines, and epidemic disease compounded the military toll enormously. Coin 3. Score, 7 out of 10. Coin 4. Long-term consequences. The Napoleonic Wars literally redesigned Europe. The Congress of Vienna in 1815 redrew borders across the entire continent. The wars gave birth to modern nationalism. Ironically, Napoleon's conquests inspired the national movements that would later tear his empire apart. They also planted the seeds of the tensions that would explode 100 years later in World War I. The butterfly effect of Napoleon's ambition still echoes in European borders today. Coin 4. Score 8 out of 10. Total score 30 over 40. Impressive destruction, Napoleon. Really, gold star. But now we enter truly dark territory. A war so devastating it nearly emptied an entire region of Europe.
Number 5. The 30 Years' War, 1618 to 1648.
The war that most people have never heard of, and the one that perhaps should terrify you the most, in terms of what it did to civilian populations. 1618. The Holy Roman Empire, a patchwork of German states, explodes into religious and political conflict. Catholics versus Protestants. But quickly, every major European power joins the carnage. France, Sweden, Spain, Denmark, the Dutch Republic. What begins as a religious dispute becomes a continent-wide power struggle. For 30 years, Central Europe is turned into a slaughterhouse. Coin 1. Socioeconomic Impact. The Holy Roman Empire, the heartland of European civilization, was annihilated economically. Armies lived off the land, looting and burning everything in their path. Trade networks that had functioned for centuries collapsed. Entire regional economies were destroyed for generations. Famine and plague, fueled directly by the war's destruction of agriculture and infrastructure, killed as many as the battles themselves. Coin 1. Score 8 out of 10. Coin 2. Duration and scale. 30 years, by definition. They were at least honest about the duration in the name. Fought across most of Central Europe, involving virtually every major European power. The geographic scope covered modern-day Germany, France, Spain, Denmark, Sweden, Poland, and the Low Countries. Coin 2. Score 7 out of 10. Coin 3. Human impact. Between 4.5 and 8 million dead. But the proportion is what makes this war staggering. The German states, the epicenter of conflict, lost between 25% and 40% of their entire population. Some regions were reduced to ghost lands. Villages burned, fields salted, populations scattered. This was not a war between armies. This was a war that consumed civilians whole. Coin 3. Score 8 out of 10. Coin 4. Long-term consequences. The Peace of Westphalia in 1648 didn't just end this war. It created the modern international order. The concept of national sovereignty, the principle that states don't interfere in each other's internal affairs, that was born here. Germany's demographic collapse set back its development by over a century. The religious fractures calcified into permanent divisions, and the geopolitical power vacuum left by a devastated Holy Roman Empire would fuel conflicts for the next 2 centuries. Total score 31 over 40. 31. 1 point ahead of Napoleon, because apparently God and nationalism make better weapons than cannons. But we are climbing higher now, and the numbers, the human numbers, are about to become incomprehensible.
Number 4. The Chinese Civil War, 1927 to 1949. Fought on and off for over 20 years between the nationalist forces of the Republic of China and the Communist Party of China. This is the war that gave birth to modern China as we know it today. And it is one of the most overlooked catastrophes in Western historical consciousness, despite involving the most populous nation on Earth. Beginning in 1927, interrupted by Japanese invasion in the 1930s and 40s, and resuming after World War II, the conflict finally ended in 1949 with Mao Zedong's communist victory and the nationalists' retreat to Taiwan, where the division persists to this day. Coin 1. Socioeconomic Impact. China's economy was devastated for decades. Infrastructure, what little existed in a largely agrarian nation, was systematically destroyed. The Japanese occupation compounded the destruction. Hyperinflation under the nationalist government became so severe that paper currency was practically worthless. Famine conditions persisted across entire provinces throughout the conflict. The economic wounds were so deep that China's recovery would not truly begin until the 1980s, 30 years after the war's end. Coin 1, score 8 out of 10. Coin 2, duration and scale. Over 20 years of active conflict. Across the entirety of mainland China, a territory the size of Europe. The overlap with the Second Sino-Japanese War and World War II expanded its geopolitical dimensions globally. Coin 2, score 7 out of 10. Coin 3, human impact. Estimates range from 4 to 9 million dead in direct combat and war-related causes. But social disruption, displacement, famine, disease, was the true mass killer. Tens of millions were displaced as refugees. Civilian reprisals by both sides massacred entire communities. China's population, already suffering from years of Japanese occupation, faced compounding waves of violence for 2 decades. Coin 3, score 7 out of 10. Coin 4, long-term consequences. The consequences are still unfolding. The People's Republic of China, the world's most populous nation, was born from this war. The Taiwan Strait remains one of the most dangerous geopolitical flashpoints on Earth today. Mao's victory set China on a path of communist governance that would include the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution, conflicts that killed tens of millions more. In terms of reshaping global geopolitics, this war's shadow extends to the present moment. Coin 4, score 9 out of 10. Total score 31 over 40. 31, tied with the 30 Years' War. But we break ties by the scale of human death, and what comes next had the audacity to involve the entire planet. The war where industrialized nations decided to kill each other in the most efficient ways mankind had ever devised.
Number 3. World War I, 1914 to 1918. The Great War. Called great not because it was wonderful, but because humans in 1914 didn't have the imagination to conceive that something even worse was coming. A single assassination in Sarajevo, Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria, triggered a chain of alliances that pulled 30 nations into the most industrialized slaughter the world had ever witnessed. Machine guns, poison gas, artillery barrages lasting weeks, trenches stretching from the English Channel to the Swiss border. Coin 1. Socioeconomic Impact. 4 years of total war dismantled the European economic order that had existed for centuries. The Ottoman, Austro-Hungarian, Russian and German empires all collapsed. Agricultural land across France and Belgium was rendered toxic for decades by chemical weapons and unexploded ordnance. The financial cost, in modern terms, exceeded $3 trillion. The economic devastation of the losing powers, particularly Germany, created the conditions for hyperinflation and political instability that would directly enable the rise of Adolf Hitler. Coin 1, score 8 out of 10. Coin 2, duration and scale. 4 years. 30 nations involved. Fought across Europe, the Middle East, Africa, Asia, and the Atlantic Ocean. The first truly global industrial war, mobilizing over 70 million military personnel, the largest military mobilization in history to that point. Coin 2, score 9 out of 10. Coin 3, human impact. Between 15 and 22 million dead, 9 million combatants, and 7 million civilians. The 1918 Spanish flu pandemic, accelerated globally by the movement of troops, killed an estimated 50 to 100 million more. While the flu is not directly the war's death toll, the war created its conditions. 21 million wounded, millions gassed, blinded, shell-shocked. The concept of PTSD, then called shell shock, entered human consciousness from this war. Coin 3, score 8 out of 10. Coin 4, long-term consequences. The consequences of World War I include World War II. That's not a small footnote. The Treaty of Versailles humiliated Germany and imposed impossible reparations. The collapse of the Ottoman Empire created the modern Middle East, with borders drawn by colonial powers that remain conflict zones today. The Russian Revolution and the Soviet Union emerged directly from the war's chaos. Every major geopolitical crisis of the 20th century traces a line back to 1914. Coin 4, score 10 out of 10. Total score 35 out of 40. And yet, it is not the worst. Because before modern nation-states, before machine guns and gas chambers, there was a force of nature on horseback that descended from the steppes of Central Asia and simply ended civilizations.
Number 2. The Mongol Invasions, 1206 to 1368. The Mongol Invasions. Not a war between two powers. A single empire, born from nothing on the Mongolian steppe, that conquered the largest contiguous land territory in human history. From the Pacific Ocean to Eastern Europe, from Siberia to the Persian Gulf. Genghis Khan and his descendants did not just wage war. They conducted the most systematic campaign of civilizational destruction ever recorded. Cities that had existed for 1,000 years simply ceased to exist. Baghdad, the center of Islamic Golden Age civilization, home to the greatest library in the world, was razed in 1258. The Tigris River reportedly ran black with ink from destroyed manuscripts and red with blood for days. Coin 1. Socioeconomic impact. The Mongols didn't just destroy armies, they destroyed civilizations. Iraq, one of the most agriculturally productive regions in the world, fed by an ancient irrigation network stretching back to Mesopotamia, was turned into desert. The irrigation infrastructure, built over 3,000 years, was obliterated and never fully restored. Persia lost so much of its population that its economic recovery took centuries. China's northern provinces were economically devastated for generations. Coin 1. Score 9 out of 10. Coin 2. Duration and scale. Over 160 years of conquest and expansion. The Mongol Empire at its peak covered 24 million square kilometers, 22% of the Earth's total land area. Campaigns stretched from Korea to Poland, from Vietnam to Hungary. No single military force in history has ever projected power across such distances before or since. Coin 2. Score 10 out of 10. Coin 3. Human impact. Estimates range from 20 to 60 million dead. In proportion to the world population at the time,
approximately 400 million people, the Mongol invasions may have killed 10 to 15% of all humans alive on Earth. In modern terms, that would be equivalent to killing approximately 800 million to 1 billion people today. China's northern population declined from an estimated 60 million to 10 million under Mongol conquest. Iran lost an estimated 75% of its population in the most devastated regions. Some cities were so completely destroyed that their locations were lost to history. An estimated 16 million people alive today carry the direct genetic legacy of Genghis Khan. Efficient, in a certain horrifying way. Coin 3. Score, 10 out of 10. Coin 4. Long-term consequences. The Mongol invasions destroyed the Islamic Golden Age. Baghdad, the intellectual capital of the medieval world, never recovered its former glory. The Black Death, the most devastating plague in human history, was partly spread by Mongol military movements, including the siege of Kaffa in 1346, where plague-infected corpses were catapulted over city walls as biological weapons. Russia's subjugation under the Mongol yoke for 240 years shaped Russian political culture in ways historians still debate today. The destruction of Persia and Mesopotamia set back Islamic civilization by centuries. Entire languages, cultures, and knowledge systems were simply erased from history. Coin 4. Score, 9 out of 10. Total score, 38 out of 40. Staggering. Civilization ending. And yet, it sits at number 2. Because the war at number 1 managed to combine everything humanity had ever learned about killing with industrial technology, ideological fanaticism, and the deliberate, systematic, bureaucratically organized murder of civilians at a scale never seen before or since.
Number 1. World War II, 1939 to 1945. 6 years that defined the modern world and nearly ended it. It began with Hitler's Germany invading Poland. It ended with atomic bombs over Japan. In between, the Holocaust, the Eastern Front, the Pacific War, the siege of Leningrad, the firebombing of Dresden and Tokyo, Stalingrad, Normandy, Auschwitz. If the Mongol invasions were nature's fury on horseback, World War II was humanity's genius, its engineering, its chemistry, its logistics, its bureaucracy, turned toward the complete annihilation of other human beings. And it nearly succeeded. Coin 1. Socioeconomic Impact. The economic destruction of World War II is simply incomprehensible. Entire nations were reduced to rubble. The Soviet Union lost an estimated 30% of its national wealth. Germany was divided and occupied. Japan's industrial infrastructure was obliterated. Poland lost over 38% of its national assets. The Marshall Plan, the American program to rebuild Western Europe, injected the equivalent of $150 billion in today's value, and it still took a decade for full recovery. Famine in occupied territories, particularly in the Netherlands, Soviet Union, and China, killed millions independently of direct combat. Coin 1. Score, 10 out of 10. Coin 2. Duration and scale. 6 years. 30 nations in active combat. Fought across Europe, North Africa, the Pacific, East Asia, Southeast Asia, and the Atlantic and Indian Oceans. The first and only war to involve every major world power simultaneously.
Total military personnel mobilized, over 100 million. It was not a world war in name only. It was literally a war of the entire world. Coin 2. Score. 10 out of 10. Coin 3. Human impact. 70 to 85 million dead. Let that number sit for a moment. 70 to 85 million human beings. That is the entire current population of Germany or France, killed in 6 years. Approximately 50 million were civilians, including 6 million Jewish people murdered in the Holocaust, the most systematic genocide in recorded history. Soviet casualties alone reached 27 million. China lost between 15 and 20 million. Poland lost over 16% of its entire population. The proportion of global population killed, approximately 3 to 4% of all humans alive on Earth, in 6 years. Coin 3. Score. 10 out of 10. Coin 4. Long-term consequences. World War II created the modern world. The United Nations, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the State of Israel, the Cold War, NATO, the European Union, built specifically to prevent this from ever happening again. The nuclear age, decolonization movements across Asia and Africa, the bipolar superpower world of the United States and Soviet Union. Every major geopolitical structure of the 21st century was shaped, directly or indirectly, by World War II. The trauma of the Holocaust redefined international law, concepts of genocide, and human rights protections. Intergenerational trauma in survivors' families has been documented across multiple generations by psychologists. And the nuclear weapons developed to end this war, they still exist. Right now, thousands of them, pointed at cities. The ultimate long-term consequence of World War II is that humanity has lived, every day since 1945, one miscalculation away from a far greater catastrophe. Coin 4. Score. 10 out of 10. Total score. 40 out of 40. Perfect score. History is not just dates and battles, my friends. It is a warning written in blood, one that humanity keeps forgetting to read. If you enjoyed watching a dragon quantify civilizational collapse, smash that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell. Because next time, we rank something equally delightful. I am Antony Emerald. Stay curious, stay humble, and for the love of all jade scales, learn from history. See you in the next one.